Hey everybody, this is John with Murder by the Book, and before we get started with tonight's event, I just wanted to let everybody know a little bit about what's been going on with us at the store while everybody gets the notification that we've gone live. So if you have not come in to visit us for a while, we have started doing in-store events again. We just started them back up in January. It's been so great to have people in the store. For a while, we're going to be doing kind of hybrid stuff, in-store or virtual, kind of one or the other. At the end of the month, Saturday, October 30th is Independent Bookstore Day. And for that, we're going to be doing one of our Murder by the Book Recommends presentations at 1 o'clock. For that, we are going to attempt to stream it live while we're doing it in the store. That'll be our first experiment with kind of doing an actual hybrid, having them both happen at the same time. We figured we would do it so that way if something happened and it shorted out or didn't work, you were just missing us talk. It wasn't an author that you had tuned in to see. So definitely check back for that and wish us luck as we figure out the tech stuff behind all of that. So when you look at the store's calendar, you're going to see things listed either as virtual or in-store. So as we've been saying, for the in-store stuff, if you see somebody on the calendar that's actually coming and they're going to be in the bookstore, it's going to be critical to let publishers know that we want to be able to do both and that there is a need for both. So if you see somebody that's going to be in the bookstore coming through, please come see them. Please buy books. So that way we can get publishers to keep sending authors to us in-store. So that way we can keep doing both. Tonight, we're super excited to have Joshua Hood and Brian Freeman back with us today. Joshua Hood is going to be talking about the Treadstone Transgression, which is the third in his Treadstone series. It just came out today. Brian Freeman's most recent release, the Born Treachery, comes out in paperback at the end of May, and he also just had the Ursulina come out February 1st. So while they are chatting tonight, if you have questions for either of them, as always, post those in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we'll leave some time to get to those at the end. But for now, I'm going to bring our gentleman out and get us started. We're going to start with Joshua. How are you today, sir?
Great. Thanks for having me. I missed the days of actually being in person.
Yeah, so hopefully next time you've got one out, we'll be able to get you in store and do an in-store event again. We're so excited. We've got like Don Bentley is finally going to come back. We're going to get to see him in May. So it's not a full schedule, but we're definitely slowly starting to get people at it again.
Well, if you start with Don Bentley, you're starting with the best. So yeah, good Texas boy.
Yeah. So for those who have not tuned in before, Joshua Hood is the author of Warning, Order, and Clear by Fire. He graduated from the University of Memphis before joining the military. Currently, he works as the Director of Veteran Outreach for the American Warrior Initiative. And as we said, his newest book, The Treadstone Transgression, just came out today. And we're going to bring on Brian Freeman. How are you today, Brian?
I'm doing great.
It's good to see you again.
It's good to be back here. As Josh says, it'll be nice when we can do it in person. So
definitely. So Brian Freeman is the best-selling author of more than 25 novels, including the Jonathan Stride and Frost Easton series. His debut novel, Immoral, won the Macavity Award and was a finalist for the Gold Dagger, Edgar, Anthony, and Barry Awards for Best First Novel. He lives in Minnesota with his wife, and as we mentioned, he has also been dipping his toes in the Ludlum world. So his newest, Born Treachery, like I said, comes out in paperback at the end of May. But for now, I'm going to turn this over to Brian and let him get us into the discussion. Like I said, if you guys have any questions for either of them, post those in the comments and we'll get to them in a little bit. But for now, gentlemen, I'm going to turn it over to you and we'll see you in a little bit.
Well, it is great to be back with you, Josh. I feel like we've got kind of a nice tradition going on here. The book comes out and we get a chance to chat. So
I know, and I just realized that I guess it depends how you look at it, but Ludlum had 27 books. You have 25. Well, you've already finished 2 that haven't been published yet. Well, 3. And so you're kind of ahead of it. That's impressive.
It's getting close. It's neck and neck here. But I figure with now that you've got 3 Treadstone books and I've got 3 Born books, we've sort of equaled what Ludlum did with his Born novels. You figure he had 3 Born novels, so we're catching up fast.
I know it is. One day I'll be able to say, well, I've written more than he did.
I do like the idea of when I do the 4th Born novel that I'll be able to say, well, yeah, actually, I now have more Born novels out than Ludlum. That does sound kind of cool. So
that means your name goes to the top.
There we go. Well, I have to congratulate you. I mean, it's launch day, and that is always exciting. And I thought Treadstone Transgression was great. I mean, I really think this is your best book, and I was really impressed with it. You know, I love the precision of the action scenes. You write action scenes so cleanly and so well. I thought your settings here in the book, the way you brought Haiti to life in really gritty, vivid detail was just terrific. And I love seeing how Adam Hayes as a character is developing. I mean, he's, you know, I feel like he's kind of a superhero without being a superhero. I mean, he's going to cut the, you know, the capabilities of a reacher, and yet there's more depth to him. And I love the sort of internal dialogue that he's got going on as you get through the book. And it's all really tightly plotted, which is great. So I think readers are just gonna love the new book. So I tip my hat. I thought this was just a terrific effort.
Well, thank you. You know, you and I had talked not only here, but a few times offline, and there were things that I had seen you do not only in Born, but in your other books that, you know, I was waiting for you to be like, stop bothering me, I'm trying to write, but I was trying to pick your brain, like how, you know, I think I've done the action thing fairly well, but there was things that I'd seen you do with place, setting, plot, pacing, where you didn't have to use so much action to drive the book. And so I tried to take a step back in these big action set pieces. And one of the things that I've loved with your Born from day one is going into your first one. How do you have a character that is already set out grow? And starting with Adam Hayes, you know, the sky's kind of the limit, but it's very easy, I think, to kind of fall into this rut where it's the new book in title only, you know, new setting, new place, same story. And what you've done in Born really pushed me to bring Hayes along to show a, you know, a growth that moves away from the physicality.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I was writing down a bunch of questions about Hayes, because I was kind of, as I was reading the book, I was thinking about Hayes and about Born, and I was curious how you would differentiate the characters. I mean, how do you see Adam Hayes as a different sort of hero than say, you know, someone like Jason Bourne?
Well, I would say that on the surface level, Bourne is, to me, feels more refined. And I'm speaking simply in the Ludlum and in what you have written. You know, he's kind of based out of Paris, and his European exploits, he seems a little more polished. And going in, I knew I was going to have to make a decision. And the one thing that I kind of focused on was where Bourne can't remember, Hayes can't forget. He can't, you know, forget what he's done. And kind of playing with that a little bit more, the idea originally was where Bourne was a scalpel, I was going to make Hayes a sledgehammer. But as you begin to progress that way, it takes a toll physically. I think it also could take a toll on the reader, because it's so easy. Speaking of Reacher and some of these other books, once you start to follow this similar formula, maybe that's the word, you can kind of figure out where a book's going within the first couple chapters. And that's something I didn't want. And I think that's something that's really made Bourne larger than life.
Yeah, and you know, I think that I was comparing the heroes, and I thought it was an interesting dichotomy. I mean, Bourne obviously been around a long time, you know, but I think Hayes is more grounded than Bourne. I think he's probably got a little less angst in his life than Bourne. And you know, and obviously, you know, Bourne is this fractured hero. I mean, he's had his memory loss, and I think that kind of colors his whole world. But I like the idea that that Hayes kind of has this emotional grounding. One of the things I think you're doing that is interesting, and I kind of wanted to see how you see this evolving. Is, you know, can you have a happy hero? in a thriller. Because I remember when Eric von Lustbader took over the Bourne novels, and I remember reading an interview with him where he was talking about the idea that he felt the need to sort of kill off Marie Saint Jacques pretty quick, because he didn't think that you could have Bourne, as a happy hero. He needed to sort of constantly be alone. And I don't know if I agree with that or not, but I thought it was an interesting concept that he didn't think it would work to have a hero that sort of has a grounded family life. And I feel like that's something you've done really well with Hayes, is that his wife and child are very much kind of at the center of his universe, and that's the sort of the fixed point that keeps him where he is. I'm just curious, kind of your thoughts about that.
Well, I think for me it was, and I think you could probably speak better on this, but I feel that I wonder what you would do, or what you could do with Bourne, if this kind of melancholy didn't have, when you think of Bourne, you think of kind of this melancholy, like this sad dude. And when you think of James Bond, you don't. You see, he's a happy kind of guy. And, it's interesting when you think about, like, the more morose of a character would seem to be more of a British character, and a more like, happy person would seem to have been more of an American trait. And with Hayes, I try to think of, when I began building this character, what would make somebody continue one after the other after the other. Like, what if you were to look at this in real life? Like, when do you reach the point where you're just like, I can't do this anymore? And so in that way, I felt that he had to have something, grounding him, something refreshing him, but also something that he is fighting for. And for me, it is that relationship with his family. And I think as this genre and as the world evolves, you wonder, I remember when the anti-heroes started showing up, and you're like, ooh, that's interesting. And then everybody's an anti-hero, then everybody's got something wrong with them. And you're like, how do all these people function? How are they not in therapy most of this book? And so I don't know, I kind of felt that, like, putting a family in, having something like that, it shone a little light into, there's a positivity to him.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, I look at Bourne, and I think that is something that he aspires to, and it's something that sort of continually eludes him. And maybe it's that, fractured element of his soul, that with the memory loss and with his sort of constantly questioning his identity and who he is, it makes it very hard for him to allow himself to be in a relationship that works. But so I'm kind of playing around with that myself, and in my first 3 Bourne books, Bourne gets involved with the Canadian journalist Abby Laurent, and with the agent Nova in Treachery. And it's again, it's clear how important, these relationships are to Bourne, and yet at the same time, they always sort of seem, like they're under a misbegotten star, that it's never going to quite work out for him in the same way that it works out for Hayes.
Well, for me, I've got to say there was a lot of fist pumping when Bourne rekindled the relationship, for those who have the book. And, it's kind of like, I've read books where the main character is an alcoholic, and he's always in the background. They're always like, oh, I want to drink. And they're like, don't drink. He's going to drink. And it's, you kind of wonder, like, is that a straitjacket? Because if there is growth, if you're searching for growth in a book, if you want them to have this arc, isn't, in my mind, and the reason that I started this with Treadstone, this one with him back with his family, is because I thought it was very important to complete this arc. We spent 2 books talking about his family being kind of off scene, and I wondered, I didn't want to be the guy that teased this on forever. And I felt that the audience deserved to see that, to see what he's been doing, what all this pain and suffering he's been going through, and why.
Right.
And I feel that it really humanizes him in this particular book. And suddenly you understand like why he's willing to take such punishment, because that's what he treasures.
One more character question, and then I want to give you a chance to just kind of set up the framework of the book for us. It's something I struggle a bit with Bourne. How do you make a character a hero who routinely kills people, often brutally? How do you make him sympathetic? How do you keep having the reader root for him?
Well, I think one thing that we've both been able to do is the stakes are always high, and I think in all of these books that we've written, like they're minding their own business in every book. They're never looking for trouble, and
trouble just finds them. Yeah.
And that's kind of the nature of the business. Sometimes I wonder, like, man, is this guy just always in the wrong place at the wrong time or what? And I believe readers, if we were telling the truth, these would be boring. It's like, hey, every time I get in trouble, when I'm in Paris or wherever else, I hang out with this girl, I get in trouble. I'm just going to retire to the Alps and never be seen again. So I think they grant us permission to kind of do that. But with Bourne, and I believe Hayes, they're always wrestling with that question, aren't they? That's kind of what drives these books is both of these men were brainwashed. And so what they're doing was a choice at one time, but it really isn't a choice anymore. And, it's kind of like you stick your hand in a terrarium with a rattlesnake and the snake bites you. Like, whose fault is it? The snake is, it's engineered, it's born to do that. And right. So maybe the first time it's your fault, but then the second time you really can't blame anybody. It might be the snake's fault the first time, but after that you can't blame anybody. And I think that therein lies the most intriguing element of these two people, is that as much as they're striving to get away from this, they're fighting a battle within themselves, and that piece of themselves they can't control.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's, that sort of moral dilemma is one of the things that I have Bourne struggling with. And I think that it's one of the things that the people around him struggle with. I mean, I like having Abby Laurent as kind of a foil for Bourne, because she comes, unlike Nova, she comes from the normal world. And so, the question is, can someone like Abby learn to accept the moral compromises that come with, the world of someone like Bourne or the world with someone like Hayes? And I mean, I wasn't clear, to what extent does Hayes's wife know any details of what he does?
Well, I think at the end of this book, she has unfortunately a very good understanding of what he does and the ramifications of what he does. But she comes face to face with it.
Yes.
I've talked to a lot of wives of guys who were in special operations and CIA and stuff, and they've told me, I had no idea what my husband did. Like, I read about it in books, or I saw, and the thing that is kind of shocking is, if you break it down, is that what Adam and Nova and Jason and everybody else, that's their reality. That's their norm.
Yeah.
And it's only when we pull the lens back away from them and show what's happening in the periphery that, we're allowing the audience to see that, it's not normal. And I think that takes a little bit of a courage, because it'd be an easier book just to be real tight and to not see anything in the periphery. It's just man versus man. But when you begin to show foils, and you begin to show moral constants in their life, then they start to question, what's going on. And my, in the next Treadstone that I'm working on, he goes back to Afghanistan. And if we look at the history there, these guys are meant to be patriots, more or less. But what happens when they begin to question the entire reason they ever started this in the beginning? And that's what is an interesting thing that I'm trying to play with now, is that, you have one line where it's, okay, I need to make sure that I stay as morally clean as possible for my family. And I'm able to justify that as the character because I'm doing the right thing. But what happens when, this ideal that you were fighting for lets you down? What becomes the problem? And that's what's kind of fascinating with these guys is I feel that as long as there's something that they can justify, like these are bad people or whatever, they're okay. But once you begin to erode that foundation, then they get into really big problems.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, in my new book, The Bourne Sacrifice, that comes out this summer, Bourne is forced into a situation where he essentially needs to influence a cutout in order to track through her back to the assassin Lenin, and she's the cutout is in way over her head and isn't a professional, and he's forced to put her in a situation that carries grave risk for her, and it's something that he really struggles with, and it kind of brings back all of the again those moral compromises that it's one thing to be going after this assassin, it's another thing to essentially be sacrificing the life of someone that got pulled into something that she didn't understand.
And there's a quote, I don't know where I heard it, but it's kind of stayed with me with this book and going into the next book. And it said something to the effect of, there are no angels in hell. And that's kind of what I feel like we're balancing here is that, in these terrible places, even the best man is still a killer. So what you're dealing with shades of morality, how do you paint that picture?
Right.
Do they have a redemption? And I think that's what we're trying to work for. But trying to figure it out for them is very difficult.
Well, let's cycle back to the new book. I'm going to get it on the screen here, and why don't you just kind of set the stage for us and talk a little bit about the nature of what Hayes is facing in this book and where the plot idea came from. What I particularly love about this plot concept, it's a nicely straightforward plot concept. It seems like it should be a simple mission, and yet then of course nothing is simple in Hayes' world. It all goes to hell. So
well, one thing, after the last book he was kind of beat up, and I wanted to show, we get to see him back with his family, and he's on a ranch that he has bought to be with his family in New Mexico. And he's beginning to get older, and he's been at home a little bit, and he's getting a little bit softer. And that's something, I just remember coming home from the military on leave, and you're only there for 2 weeks, but, you're thinking like, sitting here in the AC, etc., and the Taliban or the enemy sitting out in the rocks, like, with a bottle of water and a pocket full of food to last them all week, and so it begins with him having to prove to himself, does he still have what it takes? And you don't really know, but that's not the point, because the biggest thing that he's focused on right now is his son's birthday coming up at the end of the week, and so that is his focus, his wife's focus. And then all of a sudden, of course, this big problem erupts in Haiti, and kind of like at The Godfather, he's dragged back in, and the whole premise was the promise that he would be back in time before his son's birthday, and that this was such an easy task. And then he gets to Haiti and obviously finds out that he stumbled into the midst of it again. And Haiti fascinated me. I was watching, prior to the book, I was watching something on CNN. It was an Anthony Bourdain, No Reservations, and it was something that he had done in Haiti right after the first earthquake. And it just kind of struck me how close they are to us. I hadn't really heard much about it. I knew they'd had an earthquake, but this vibrant culture, these vibrant people, they started showing carnival, and I was like, man, that would be a great place to put a thriller, is put a guy over there in the middle of carnival where they basically have no infrastructure. Nobody's going to come help him. And it's as I was writing the book, they had another earthquake. The president was assassinated, and it was like you couldn't have picked a better place. I mean, it sounds terrible because my heart really goes out to them and everything that they've had to deal with, but it was a setting unlike I'd ever seen. And so putting Hayes there, the terrain and the place really becomes another antagonist working against him. And I feel like it worked pretty well. I don't know off the top of my head any other books that have been put there. I mean, it was hard. I didn't want to go to the Middle East, and Bourne's kind of got Europe locked down, so it's always a search. Like, where else is nobody writing?
Yeah, I loved the way you brought Haiti to life in this book. I was sure you had to have spent a lot of time there because it's so vivid and so gritty in the way you describe it. I told you I don't think you're really going to be having the Haitian Tourist Authority as a fan after this book, but man, it just you could just feel the sweat and the carnival and the slums. I mean, you just did a fantastic job of bringing that to life. I was curious, were you drawing on any of your experiences from other locales to kind of pour into your scenes in Haiti, or was this all kind of coming out of your imagination and your research?
Well, unfortunately, a slum's a slum, and I've been to places that are similar to what I imagined that was like. And then being from the South and I've been in areas around there, so what that humidity feels like. And then so I tried to replicate that, and I've been in Jamaica and the more acceptable places. I tried to go to Haiti twice. The first time my wife wasn't having, and the second time you couldn't travel there. And she was probably right on both of those accounts. But I wish I could have gone because I tried to do it justice. But sometimes, when you're writing this scene, there's just something that can only be that anchors a scene that you only know if you've been there. Like when
Sure.
in both of your Bournes, I was like, the last one, I think I asked you, well, did you just go? Like it was in the midst of COVID. Did you go to England? Because I'd been to England a few years before, and I'm following you in my mind. Like I'm smelling the smells. I feel the coffee. I bought coffee from that same place. I walked down that same road, and I'm like, man, I'm there. And you can't do that, I don't believe, unless you've walked those streets. You can't do it on Google. You can't read about it. It's just those little things of authenticity. And that's what I was worried about with Haiti. I was like, man, somebody's going to call me out. Like, yeah, that isn't this or that. But I feel like I did the best I could with what I had.
Yeah, no, I thought you did a terrific job, and it's true. I mean, that's been one of the challenges, I think, of COVID is that being stuck home and not able to go out and visit places face to face. I mean, it simply does add an extra layer of authenticity when you really have walked those streets and you know what it's like. So I know for me in writing these couple of Bourne books, when I couldn't go out and travel, I was choosing settings where I'd at least been before, so that I knew what it felt like to be there, and I could use that on top of any extra research I did.
Because sometimes I've noticed when you go, you're thinking one thing, I'd like to do this or that, and then you get there where you're going on the ground, and the space begins to tell you this different story, and it opens this part of your mind you hadn't even thought about, and suddenly it's going in this creative direction that I haven't felt that much since COVID, because you're kind of sifting through memories and other things. Like, was it really like this? I don't know, but it kind of feels like you're eating tofu instead of the real thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and I mean, because place is such an important part of thrillers, and you want to be able to bring all of the senses to bear. I mean, if you're only seeing it sort of one dimensionally yourself, it's just a lot harder to bring it to life, and you always feel like you're running the risk of making a mistake. So, well, I one of the things I was noticing as as I read the book and I was thinking about it in writing my Bourne thrillers as well. The U.S. government just doesn't fare too well in Treadstone books or Bourne books, and that was really true in a lot of Ludlum thrillers as well. There's just a lot of snakes in the plane, so to speak. For you, is that a deliberate choice? I mean, you've got antagonists that are just not great people, part of the government, and the same's true in the Bourne novels. Bourne never feels that he can trust anyone in Treadstone. What do you think that says about our plotting and Ludlum's plotting?
Well, that was one thing that I felt that I had to be. I felt that was one thing that was a hallmark of Ludlum, and I think it was because it was during the Cold War, and I felt that if I strayed too far away from it, I wouldn't be doing him justice. And while I would like to say it's a huge stretch of an imagination to make some of these things happen in our government, I find that as I begin to kind of research ideas, these things start popping up and you're like, that really happened.
Yeah.
I didn't even make that up. That guy did this. And so, that is one of the hard parts, the straitjacket as it is of writing for these estate books is like, you're only allowed to color so far out the lines. Like these books would be a lot easier if there was no Treadstone, or if he could just, go do whatever else. But you're trying to pay like an homage to what has been like created, and you're kind of given marching orders. And while you're given a lot of freedom, like how much easier would it be if you were writing a Jason Bourne book and he woke up one day and he remembered everything? And you're like, well, that solves that problem. Let's go kind of mine different ore over here now. But when you have to kind of out, I guess, to follow these great characters, you have to stay within, what was laid out for them. And actually, for me, it's difficult coming up with these, like, how many bad actors can we have? How many bad apples? How do we connect this person with a different one? And what do you think? I mean, you bear the same burden.
Yeah. No, the interesting thing is, I think what makes it a little bit easier is, Ludlum really grew up in the 70s, in a post-Vietnam era and a Watergate era. I mean, you had, and that was sort of where all of the conspiracy mongering kind of took root, and everything from the Warren Commission to Deep Throat and just this nature of you can't trust what the government is telling you. I mean, that clearly feeds into so many of Ludlum's thrillers. I think if you look at where we are in 2022, I mean, I think you see a lot of parallels in terms of division and people believing on both sides in some wild conspiracies and a deep distrust of a lot of things, not just in government but in technology and society. So it to me, it felt like kind of a target rich environment, that there were just a lot of things going on in government and society these days that Ludlum would have had a field day with. And so I've been trying to do the same thing.
But it's what's interesting. I was thinking the other day, actually, is that when Ludlum was writing, you could have a KGB guy going after a CIA guy. And now, it's not too far into the future where you could have a Russian FSB guy going after an American CIA guy in Ukraine or something like that. Right. It's almost like we've come full circle. And especially with, the rise of what's going on in Ukraine and everything else, you could kind of go back to that Cold War mindset, and it could still work.
Right. Yeah, that's funny. I was thinking the exact same thing. In fact, one of the questions I wrote down was, do you think we're writing the kind of books that Ludlum would be writing today? And I kind of feel like, yeah, he would see this as awfully fertile ground for the kinds of stories he told.
I feel the same way, because if you look at the other books that he wrote, he was dealing with the same, it was espionage.
Yeah.
And while we have cooler gadgets and different um things that he didn't have, the problem's still the same. The tradecraft is still the same. The adversary is still the same. And it's not too hard of a stretch to see a place for a treadstone in today's, political machinations.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think anyone would sort of blink at the idea of a treadstone concept at this point. I think it would it would have a lot of followers immediately. So, what you mentioned antagonists, and I wanted to talk a little bit about villains, because one of the things that I've struggled with a bit in the Bourne books is, I love writing very juicy villains, and you've got some wonderfully evil villains in all your books, and I think this one in particular. Um, do you ever regret killing off your villains? I mean, they need to get their just desserts, and yet at the same time, I've often sort of felt regret about getting rid of them, because I'd like to have them come back, which is frankly one of the reasons I've used the assassin Lenin in now a couple of the Bourne books, partly because I wanted a parallel to Bourne's hunt for Carlos in the original Ludlum books, but also because I liked the idea of an antagonist that was sort of at Bourne's level, and wasn't someone he could readily dispatch, sort of build toward a huge final confrontation. So do you ever regret having to knock off some of your villains? Would you like to bring them back?
I don't. I regret not coming up with anybody as good as Lennon is, honestly, because I think when you create an antagonist of that level that matches, you have to let them live, because it's like, Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty. Like, there was only one person who could match him, and I think that was a big thing with Ludlum. Uh, and so I've actually, tried. I don't know, as you build a villain, you get a certain way. And for me, I get, halfway through the book, and it's like, it's like you're doing a 400-meter sprint, and about halfway, do you have enough to beat the guy in front of you? And, I've tried to come up with some good characters, antagonists especially, but none of them have been able to carry that torch, I don't think, because you need a certain type. And I was actually going to ask you, when you created Lennon, did you know he was going to continue? I mean, were you doing that specifically to have a Carlos-esque character, or did he just continue to grow?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly struggled with that throughout the writing of the Bourne Treachery. Until really close to the end, I had not decided whether I was going to kill off Lennon or not. And ultimately, I just decided it would he was such a good character, that and such a strong antagonist to Bourne, that he needed to sort of carry over into the next books, and create a larger story arc around this assassin. So I built him as the idea that, yeah, he'd be kind of a parallel to Carlos, but I was really going back and forth until the very end. How am I going to, they're going to obviously have some sort of final confrontation in this book, but is that going to be the end of it, or will it carry forward? So,
And it's the ultimate. It's kind of like the greatest and the worst moment. You're like, I built him too well. Kill him. Like, I can't really make anybody better. There's nobody that could fight him that well. And, I've been trying to create a character that could do that. In a lot of ways, my problem would be like, how would he, because you don't want to have, for me at least, it's important that you end this antagonist at the end of each book, because you don't want them particularly hunting his family, because that's a problem. But then at the same time, the idea of a family is both a blessing and a curse with him. And so, I feel like I would need to know like how many more of these do I have before you can plot, because if you lay such a perfect cornerstone, you want to know that you're going to be able to finish the entire building. At least I do.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's kind of where I've been with that, is that if you create something a master character as it was, you want to make sure you kind of like take him all the way.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, and I think that's the nice thing about doing multiple books is you can sort of let story arcs evolve. And I feel like for me, the fourth Bourne novel that I'm just starting in on, it sort of pulls together the threads of several story arcs that emerged in the first three books and kind of brings everything together in kind of one, finally kind of ties everything up from the first three books, which for me then says, okay, well, that gives me the opportunity to have a shorter story arc for readers. But then, if we end up doing more Bourne book, more Treadstone books, we've got the idea. I've got then an opportunity to sort of start a new story arc and carry that over the next several books.
So I've kind of looked at it as I'm starting the fourth also. I'm a quarter of the way through. And I'm looking back, and I guess it's a hindsight is 2020. There's so much that I wish that I had done. And I feel that I need to, after I turn in this one, if I was to be able to allow to write another one, I would love, and I feel like this arc needs to go back to a prequel, because none of this, I think it would resonate more if you got to see Hayes in his prime in Treadstone, because we've seen him afterwards dealing with his family. But I don't think that the more he begins to go forward, it's hard to balance that if you don't know how far he's come.
Right.
And I've been toying with that idea. Kind of, I was wondering, I was going to ask you, these threads that you're pulling together, did you weave them and leave them open at the beginning and you knew you were going to come back? Or is it just as if you progressed, you're like, oh, this could tie into that?
Yeah, more the latter. I knew, and I've been sort of planting Easter eggs along the way to say that there's something else in Bourne's past that needs to come to light. And all the way back in Evolution, he was talking about the fact that he knew there was some aspect of his past that was going to at some point come back to haunt him, but he didn't know what it was, doesn't remember it. And then you start to find out that Lennon had some sort of involvement with what that secret was in his past. And so I didn't know what the secret was, but I just knew that with each of the three books, he was sort of nudging closer and closer to what that awful secret was. And so in the Bourne Defiance, that's where everything comes together. And so the main thing for me from a plotting standpoint was to really think through what would be a great secret that would kind of pay off the things that happen in the first three books. And I think this is really going to work. I'm really excited about number 4, but I deliberately didn't want to kind of tie my hands. I wanted to just lay enough out there that depending on how the plotting would go, I could go in a number of different directions.
And that's what's, really great about Bourne or all these characters, is that you have a subconscious level that, Ludlum kind of created when he talked about Treadstone and McUltra and everything that would create it. You have something happening in the back that they might or might not be aware of. And it is very fascinating, like what, trauma's fascinating in some ways, but what has been done to them, at any moment, you think like Bourne's genesis comes from, him getting shot. He can't remember. And so you always wonder, well, will this punch to the head jog something loose, or will it knock something,
yes, Yeah, that's an interesting concept that may show up in a book.
But it's, I think it's very true to his vision,
right,
of what he wanted these characters, and the way he saw, I guess, his universe was that nothing, even what he has written, or not even what we see, is ever 100% true. And he was kind of the master of the bait and switch as it was. You would think you'd have something figured out, and all of a sudden something would come out of nowhere. And I think that's been a hallmark of your books as well. Um, and, I'm trying to add a little refined edge, I guess, to Hayes, but in that sense, I have to be careful because you don't want a mirror of Bourne. I don't think that. I would like for them to cross paths.
Yeah, we're gonna have to work on that. Yeah,
a phone call or whatever, but it's to see, combined paths.
Yeah. I'm curious. What do you think? What do you think? How would Ludlum, think about how would he see this whole Ludlum multiverse that's been, created since he passed away? I mean, you've got Bourne and Treadstone, Blackbriar's coming. I mean, there's just this kind of this whole Ludlum universe. I think he would love it. I'm just kind of curious what you think about it's going off in some of the interesting directions. So.
If I was an author and I'd written 3 books based on one character, and then, however many years later, there's multiple spinoffs just coming from, there's enough, rich heritage in what I wrote for 3 other people to start 3 separate books. Like, that's gotta be just like, yes, that's really cool. Good.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, I've got more questions, but I'm sure John is listening in here. I just want to make sure that if he's got questions for you, and if anybody online has questions, we give a chance for them to talk about that.
Yeah. So we've got a few. So for Joshua, do you think that, I realize you're not going to have a basis for comparison, but do you think that it was easier for you to jump in doing Treadstone, knowing that it wasn't something where, like, Brian is taking this character that everybody knows so well and writing him? Do you think it was easier for you to jump into the world that way?
It was personally for me, because I had a whole lot more freedom than what Brian had. And I really feel that, not to step on any toes, but I feel that Brian was brought in to kind of, feed this ember that had kind of been gone out. And, he brought back, it was kind of like the Bond movie, the first Daniel Craig. They wanted to bring this franchise into the 21st century. They wanted to modernize it. It was a huge risk with what they did, but it paid off. And I felt that Brian did the same thing. And I don't know if as much as I think I would have, that pressure might have gotten to me, to be honest, because it was hard enough just doing this, but to be, headlining the show, that I think that takes a maturity and a skill set and a confidence that I'm not at yet. And I know Brian fairly well. We talk. And so I can say that because I've learned that. And I think that if I'd gone into it, I would not have been able to do it as well as he did.
Well, it was definitely, you think about tackling Bourne, and your first reaction is, holy crap, I get to write the Bourne novels. And the second reaction is, holy crap, I got to write the Bourne novels. So, but the thing about it is it's also just a hell of a lot of fun. That's what I try to remind myself every day. The opportunities we've got to be able to, to build this out in the Ludlum universe, it's just really cool.
So, Brian, had you done any other IP stuff before you did this?
No, actually, this was the first time that I've kind of delved into that sort of legacy work. But it's been a lot of fun. I was worried about how would it be to take on someone else's character, and then I kind of thought about it and thought, well, I've actually known Jason Bourne a lot longer than I've known Jonathan Stride. So once I realized I'd been, knowing Jason Bourne for 40 years, it felt like, well, okay, it shouldn't be that hard to kind of, be a part of his world. So.
So you mentioned, Joshua, that the two of you talk a lot, but because you're writing stuff that's essentially kind of in the same universe, where if you do something, it might have ramifications for what Brian's doing. Do you guys bounce plot stuff off, or is there any kind of coordination about what's happening in the world?
I we did at the beginning, and I kind of asked him like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this." There's a few times like we've chatted back and forth where we're just like, I wonder if they'll let us put them together this time. And, it's been like, maybe this isn't the right time to ask. But yeah, I think that like Brian had a very clear vision from the beginning, and I kind of had an idea of how we wanted to launch them. And as they've kind of gained steam, I feel that convergence is coming, but I don't think it was with the first couple of books. I think as we get to know these characters a little bit better, I just feel with every book, there's an intersection about to happen. I'm just waiting for him to call me. And he mentioned that he was thinking about it, and I thought about it, and it's just the time. And I guess we probably need to ask somebody.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get that figured out, though. That there's some real opportunities there.
So, Brian, you've been great to lead the chat with us tonight. I mentioned when I was doing your bio that you just had the Ursulina come out. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that real quick?
Yeah, the Ursulina, it goes hand in hand with my Edgar Award finalist, The Deep, Deep Snow, and it's a standalone, it's a prequel, it's a follow-up novel to The Deep, Deep Snow. It's really all three of those things, but essentially it's a story set back in the 1980s, told by a young sheriff's deputy named Rebecca Calder, and she's dealing with a series of killings in this very rural, very wooded Midwest area where a killer is sort of hiding behind the legend of the Ursulina, which is a long-standing legend in this county that's sort of like Bigfoot or Sasquatch or the Yeti, and so that legend kind of overlays the story. But really, it's Rebecca's confession to her daughter. That's really the whole essence of the book, and her daughter is Shelby Lake from The Deep, Deep Snow, and it's a very fast-paced mystery, and yet it's a very, very emotional novel. Those two books probably my two favorites of anything I've written, and I kind of see them as, even though they're different characters and the plot sort of stand on their own, I see them as sort of one long book put together. So I hope everybody discovers the Ursulina. I'm really proud of that book.
It didn't that get, is that the one that was picked up by Netflix, or
The Deep, Deep Snow has been optioned for TV, so we'll cross our fingers that we'll see it on the screen. So
nice. Have y'all, this might be something that you guys might not have, I'm guessing, no control over because it's like you said, legacy work, but has there been any talk about potentially a Bourne revival on screen anywhere?
I haven't heard about it. Josh and I were just talking about that the other day. I would love to see it. I mean, I feel like the timing would be just perfect to bring Bourne back. And, I wouldn't expect that they would necessarily have Matt Damon in the role again, but I would certainly think he'd probably want to executive produce it. And, it's now been enough years that, boy, I think it would be a huge hit to bring Bourne back at this point. And, we'd love to see it because I think it would just, ramp up the interest in all the Ludlum novels tremendously. So.
Yeah, there's probably been talk, but it hadn't been to us.
Did you miss the call too? I'm thinking maybe it's one of those potential spam calls on my phone, and I just didn't answer it. So
I mean, I've read every now and then something will pop up where it says, the reason there wasn't another one is because the producer and Matt Damon didn't, and then who owns the rights and whatever. But I got to be honest, I was not really impressed with the last James Bond movie, and I felt that with the market kind of open, I just kind of expect any day to them say, Bourne to step in, because I felt like that was kind of what happened, and I've always felt that he's kind of America's James Bond. And
yeah. I'm honestly kind of surprised they have not yet announced the revival. It seems like the timing is perfect for it. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll write it if they need me to.
All right. So, excluding each other's books, what is something that you've read lately that you loved? Let's start with Joshua.
Wow. I've been reading just such a variety of things. I'm trying to think. I got back and started visiting the old Jack Higgins books, just because I kind of wanted a little bit of that feel from what the Bourne had in this next book that I'm writing. And I read Mark Graney's Sierra 6, which I thought was amazing, how he did the dual plot lines. And there's a couple nonfiction things in there, but I bounce around, kind of try to go through so many books. It's hard to remember all that I've read this year.
How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I've been going back and sampling some of the authors from the 1970s, actually, as that were sort of Ludlum contemporaries and taking different takes on espionage. So I've been going back and reading a few Jean le Carré novels. So I read The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and I read Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and it was really fun to be able to kind of go back into a Cold War mentality and sort of enjoy the voice that Le Carré created for Smiley. So yeah, I've really been enjoying his books.
Awesome. And I know you both mentioned that you were starting on your fourth Bourne novels. So Joshua, is that what you've got coming up next? Is the next one in the Treadstone series?
Yeah, and I'm working my way towards the end of a book. Signed a deal with Blackstone for a new series, and it's called Retrieval. And working towards the end of that, I got a little behind, but should be turning that in very soon. I'm very excited about that project. Very excited to be working with Blackstone, and
they're terrific to work with. You're really going to enjoy it.
They're great people, and I love their vision. And it's a story I've wanted to tell for a while, and I'm just really looking forward to it getting out. So look for that in the near future.
Perfect. Yeah, it's been really cool to see them build up. We've been lucky to get to work with them and to see them build up this great mystery list that they've been working on. How about you, Brian? What do you have coming up next?
Yeah, it's going to be a busy second half of the year. The Bourne Sacrifice comes out on July 26th, and I can't wait to have that one in readers' hands. And then there'll be two more before the end of the year. I've got a standalone thriller called I Remember You. Just got the advanced copies of that. That is coming out on August 9th.
Oh, that's great.
And then Jonathan Stride, everyone's favorite Duluth detective, is back on November 1st in The Zero Night. And in fact, tomorrow online, Crime Reads is going to be doing an exclusive cover reveal and an excerpt from the new Stride novels. So check that out on Twitter and Facebook. So
perfect. Awesome. Well, I think that is going to about do it for us for this evening. So for anyone who might have tuned in late, we have been chatting with Joshua Hood, whose newest Treadstone novel, The Treadstone Transgression, just came out today. We've been talking with Brian Freeman, who his most recent paperback is The Ursulina, which came out in February. And he'll have The Bourne Treachery, which is his most recent, is about to come out in paperback at the end of May. If you missed any part of our chat tonight, Facebook and YouTube will archive it, so you can go back and rewatch. You can also go back and see, we've been lucky enough to chat with these guys a couple of times throughout the last couple of years. So all their previous discussions, so if you want to hear them talk about the previous Bourne books, those are all up there as well. Brian and Joshua, it was so good to see you guys tonight. You guys take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, John.
Thank you much.